Hey, hello all. This is Pradeep Talloju from Prowess Software. Today, I'll talk about how Tyk API Gateway is implemented. This is one of the several API gateways that are available in market for you to use. The good thing about this is it is also available in the open source flavor. Today, we'll install and we'll also configure one of our backend services onto the gateway and see how easy it is to configure and expose your internal services. So let's look at the network topology that we are working with. As you can see in the center, there is Tyk API Gateway, which is exposed on port 8080 currently on my local host. The gateway provides functionality for authentication, basically the mediation, transformation, and full lifecycle management of APIs. You can use this to productize your APIs that are behind the scenes, and then you can do a lot more functionality like rate limiting and orchestration, etc. You can also do analytics with the traffic that is coming in and how you want to measure it and get insights out of it. Tyke API Gateway also needs a Redis cache storage. It is a data store that is in constant touch with the API Gateway itself. So our intent here is actually to use an API that is inside our enterprise and expose it through an API gateway. I've built a backend API implementation that is exposed on port 9080, as you can see. When you actually download the Tyke API open source Docker distribution, you will see that the two containers here, the Docker Tyke IO slash Tyke gateway slash Tyke gateway, and the Redis come with it. It is a very simple Docker compose file with just two images there and a network definition, and then you have port mappings. That's all you have there. And if you have a Docker desktop, it's as easy as just saying Docker desktop, Docker compose up, and it will bring up both the gateway and the Redis cache that is needed for it to function. Now, what I've done is actually added a backend API implementation along with that Docker Compose file, wherein I have my student info app that is going to just have one simple operation, a get operation, HTTP get, that is going to get me the student's information. So as part of my Docker Compose, as you will see when we actually implement it, you will have an extra image of student info app that is going to get the information of a student when invoked. What we'll see is actually verify that the student info app is working internally, and then we're going to configure that onto Tyke API Gateway and then invoke the same service, this time through the gateway. So as you can see from the browser, we'll try to connect to the API gateway and then through that invoke the backend API implementation. All right, so this is the setup that we needed to know before we jump into implementation. And in a few moments, we'll go ahead and take a look at how this is configured and invoked. So if you look at the tyke.io open source installation site, you will see that there are several ways that you can actually install on several environments. The one that I've used is the Docker version. It's really simple. You can just go in here and just only 3 steps really, wherein if you chose Docker Compose, which is basically going to get the package of Tyke Gateway Docker, and then you would just unzip it and cd into the directory wherein you have your Docker Compose file, and then you start it up. So let's go into the console and take a look at what we have there in the Docker Compose. So I'm taking you here into the location where I have my Tyk Gateway Docker downloaded. So I go into this folder and show you the contents. I'm really concerned only with the Docker Compose YAML. The rest is all, ready for me to actually use with the default configurations, of course. So I'm going to type in the Docker Compose YAML and show you the contents. This is the Tyk gateway that I was showing you on the presentation. All it needs is Tyk Redis, that is the one that is dependent on, and Tyk Redis is also added here with the image and the port mapping, and the network is same for all three. The third one, the only change or addition that I have done is adding my backend API service so that I can expose it through the gateway. So the extra lines that you see from the one that is downloaded is this image that I've built so that I can invoke it, and then the port mapping, and then the network, the same network that I'm going to use. So it's really as simple as saying Docker compose up, and I want it on the detached mode, so I'm going to use -d. As you can see, the network is created, and then the containers, based on the dependency, the sequence is set for Redis to come up first. Then there is student info and a gateway that can come up in any order, because there's no dependencies for student info definitely. So how do I check? I'll go ahead and do a Docker PS and see that all three containers are actually running. Great. Now that your Tyk API gateway is up and running, you want to do a few operations. You want to verify it first if it is running, and then you want to configure your backend API to be exposed from your API gateway. And this documentation here is actually a Swagger documentation on Tyk website that gives you all the operations that you can perform on the server once it's up and running. We don't want to go through all of this at this time, but all we are going to do is a minimal setup, that is, first check if the server is running, and then you want to actually configure the backend API, the student info app API, if you remember, into the API gateway. So let's go ahead and do that right now. I have the ones that are needed for us on the Postman here. Is you could use any REST client, and I'm going to run hello, which is going to tell me whether the server is up and running or not. I know that by default it has started it off on 8080. We have also verified on Docker Compose that it is running on 8080. So I'm going to run it and see if I get a pass. So I have the status pass, which means it is actually running. Good. So the next thing that I want to do is verify if my student info is actually working. So this is not really invoking through the API gateway, but I'm checking if my backend service that I had started off on the Docker is running. So I know that this is the host and this is the URI. The port is 9080 as we have seen in the presentation. I'm going to hit send and check for a response. Well, I do have a response. So this backend service is actually working. Good. Now I would want to create an API. And for creating an API, there is actually a lot of things that you could set, but we are doing what is minimally required for us to expose this backend service onto the API. To do that, these are some mandatory items that you need to set. So I have this minimal configuration wherein I would say the name is student info, API ID is student info. And then on the proxy tag is where I'm actually configuring. I'm going to say my URI on the API gateway is going to be /student info. And the target URL, if you remember, was this URL that we have used in our internal API that we just invoked. So I'm going to say anything that comes in on my API gateway with a URI of /studentinfo is going to be redirected to this target URL on my backend. And that's all really I'm doing here and nothing else. I'm just going to say just the listen path is stripped off, and then it is enabled, which is active right now. Other than that, I'm really not doing anything else, just doing a plain redirection. So I hit send, and on my gateway, I get a response back that student info, the status is okay, and it is added. Great. The one thing that I would want to do after I do this is a reload. A reload is essential whenever you actually stop or actually add or update any configuration through your post for API. So I'm going to do a quick reload, and then it is going to say okay. If the status is okay, it means that the latest API that you have just configured is up and running and it is able to invoke it. So now I want to invoke the student info through the gateway. So that's what I'm doing here, because I know that on 8080 and the URI /student info, I've just configured to listen to my backend API through the API gateway. So I'm going to hit send, and voila, there you go. You have your response, the same response that you would have seen in your internal API, but this time, as you can compare, this is directly hitting the backend API, while this was hitting the API gateway that we just configured. Awesome. So just to note that this is a very simplistic scenario, very minimal information that we have actually configured with, but there are a host of things that you can do with it. You can do a lot more transformation when you get your response back from the backend API. You can do some analytics on the traffic that is coming in, and there is a lot of other things as well. Just also note that what we have looked at is the open source, which has a little bit of minimal features themselves. If you used the licensed versions, there is one on-premise that you can install and then use it with the license, or there is also an option of the SaaS offering from Tyk. You could use either of these three options, but the good thing again there is you also have a 2-week trial period wherein you can use either the platform, the on-premise platform installation, or the full version on the SaaS, that you can try it out and check if it meets your needs. The intent of this session was to show how easy and quick you can actually set it up with the open source one, and to give you an idea, the whole setup that I did was under 2 hours, including the backend API that I had created so that I can do a demo of this. So that's all I have from the demo today. I hope you learned a little bit, and I hope you go ahead and try your hands with this, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.